Shabbat Shalom. Doing a sound check before we start in about a minute. Please let me know if you can hear me okay. Chaz and Charles, can you hear me? Great. Thank you, Charles. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to everyone. Welcome back to our sanctuary. And it's different not being in my sukkah. I hope everyone is doing well. I hope everyone is going to have a nice Shabbat. I know it's going to be a good Shabbat because you're here with me. Yes, Fern, I got your note. I added Dana Driscoll to the Mishaberach list. Thank you so much. Shabbat Shalom. Welcome to Agudath Israel Etz Ahayem Synagogue here in Montgomery, Alabama. I am Rabbi Scott Kramer, and we are praying out of Sidor Lev Shalem for Shabbat and holidays, Shabbat and festivals, and we will begin on page 5. With Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Baruch Hu Ni L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Tzedchem L'Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Mi-Melech Malchei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. We continue with Lechu Neranena. Page 11. Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena Ladunai. Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena Ladunai. Naria, Naria, Letzor Yishenu, Nekadma Fana Betoda. Naria, Naria, Letzor Yishenu, Bizmirot Naria Lo. Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena Ladunai. Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena, Lechu Neranena Ladunai. Naria, Naria, Letzor Yishenu, Nekadma Fana Betoda. Naria, Naria, Letzor Yishenu, Bizmirot Naria Lo. Let us go and sing to Adonai. Let us trumpet praise to our protector. Filled with thanks, let us greet God, raising our voice in song. Great is Adonai, a great sovereign than all other deities. God's hands form the earth's deep. Mountain crests, too, are God's work. The sea is God's, for God made it. Dry land was fashioned by God's hands. Come then, let us bow and kneel. Let us bend our knees in the presence of Adonai who formed us. For Adonai is our God, and we are God's flock, sheep in God's caring hands. If only you would listen today to God's voice and not become hard-hearted like the people at the Merivah, like that time at Massah in the desert, when your ancestors tried me and tested me, though they had seen what I had wrought. For 40 years I was troubled by that generation, and I said, these are a people whose hearts have gone astray. They do not know my way, so in anger I swore they would not enter my rest. 40 shana kut bedor va'omar to'e levavim ve'im lo yad drachai asher nishpati v'api im yiva'u el menuchati. Page 13, Psalm 96. Ashiru ladonai shir chadash, shiru ladonai kol haaretz, shiru ladonai baruchu shemo, basru miyom leyom yeshuato, sapru vagoyim kivodo, bechol amim nifliotov, ki gadol Adonai, O mehulal miyob, no rahu, al ko Elohim, lai lai lai, ki ko Elohe, ha'amim eli, v'adonai shamayim asa, od v'hadar le'efanav, oz v'tiverem behemikdasho. Havu ladonai mishpachot amim, havu ladonai kavod vahos, havu ladonai ke'evod shemo, seu mincha, uvaho lechatzerot, hav lai lai lai, shtachavu ladonai be'adrat kodesh, chilum mipanav kol haaretz, imrum vagoyim, Adonai malach, avtikun tevel balatimot, yadin amim be'meisharim, yismechu hashamayim v'tagel haaretz, ayir amayamu melo, yalo sadai, v'chol asher bo lai lai lai, az yiradu Kolat seyar lifnei Adonai kiva lishpot haaretz yishpot tevel b'tzedek v'yamim be'emunato yalai lalai lahayai lalalai yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai 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 yai lai lai lai. We continue on page 15 with Psalm 97. Adonai reigns, let the earth be glad, the many distant lands rejoice. Clouds and thick darkness surround the divine. Righteousness and justice secure God's throne. Fire goes before God, consuming besiegers round about. Flashes of lightning illumine the land. The earth watches and trembles. Mountains melt like wax at the approach of Adonai, at the approach of the Master of all the earth. The heavens tell of God's righteousness, and all the nations see God's glory. Worshippers of idols, be shamed for praising false gods. All that is deemed supreme bow before God. Zion hears of it and rejoices. The cities of Judah exult as you, Adonai, pass judgment. You, Adonai, are above all that is earthly, exalted over all that is worshipped as divine. Those who love Adonai hate evil. God protects the lives of the faithful, saving them from the hands of the sinful. Light is sown for the righteous and joy for the upright. Rejoice in Adonai, you righteous people, and thank God as you pronounce the divine holy name. Or zaru ala tzadik v'leishol lev simcha. Simchu tzadikim b'Adonai. V'hoduhu lezecher kadeshum. Page 17, Psalm 98. Hamizmor shir ladonai shir chadash ki niflaot asa Oshia lo yemino ozero wako ocho adia dona yeshuato leena goyim gilat kato zachar chasta ve'emunato leveit Yisrael ra'u cholav se'aretz et Yeshuat Eloheinu Oriu ladunai kol haaretz bitchum veranenu v'zameru zamru ladonai bechinar v'kol zimera b'chatzot rod v'kol shofar Oriu lifnei amelech Adonai Yiramayam u'maloho tevel v'yoshveva neharot yimcha uchaf Yachad arim yiranenu lifnei Adonai kiva lishbot haaretz yishbot tevel b'tzedek v'yamim b'meisharim yalai yalai la 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 yalai la 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 yalai la 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 Yalai la 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 Yalai la 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 Yalai la 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 Yalai la 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 Yalai la 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 Page 19, Psalm 99. Adonai reigns, nations tremble. The one enthroned amidst the cherubim makes the world quake. Adonai is great in Zion above all nations. They shall acknowledge your name, saying, Great, all-inspiring, Holy One. A sovereign strength lies in the love of justice, and you forge the paths of truth, judging Jacob righteously and justly. Exalt Adonai, our God. Bow down before God, the Holy One. Moses and Aaron among God's priests, and Samuel among those who called upon the divine name, called to you, and you answered them. You spoke to them from amidst the cloud, that they kept your covenant and the law you gave them. You answered them, Adonai, our God. You were a forgiving God to them, even as you punished them for their transgressions. Exalt Adonai, our God, and bow down at God's holy mountain, for Adonai, our God, is holy. Romemu Adonai Elone v'ishtachavu la'ar kadesho, ki kadosh Adonai Eloheinu. Page 21. We rise for Psalm 29. Mizmor leDavid, havu l'Adonai b'nei Elim, havu l'Adonai kavod va'oz, havu l'Adonai kavod shemo, ishtachavu l'Adonai behadrat kodesh. Kol Adonai na'alamayim ela kavod yirim Adonai amayim rabim. Kol Adonai ba'koach, Kol Adonai behadar, Kol Adonai shover razim, v'shaber Adonai et alzei halvanon. Vayarkidem kemo egel Levanon v'Syrian kemo venreimim. Kol Adonai chotzev lavotesh, Kol Adonai yachil Adonai midbar kadesh, Kol Adonai yecholeu ayalot. Vayechasov Yarot Uvechalo Kulo Omer Kavod Adonai Kulo Omer Kavod Adonai Lamabul Yashav Vayeshav Adonai Melech Leolam Adonai Oz Leamo Yitim Adonai Yevarech Etamo Vashalom Etamo et amo v'shalom. You may be seated, page 23. Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Shamor v'zachor b'dibor echad. Ishmiyanu elam yuchad. Adonai echad. Ushamo echad l'shemo tiferet v'litila lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikam bela likrat Shabbat lechu v'nelcha ki mekora beracham merosh mikedem nesucha sob maaseh b'machshvat chila lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikabela mikdash melech ir melucha kumitzi mitocha hafecha ravlach shevet biyemek habacha v'uyachamo alayich imla lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikabela hitnari me'afar kumi Liv shevik de tifartecha mi ayad benishai beitalachmi karva enav shigi Allah lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikabela hitoreri kiva ore kumi ori shir daberi kivod Adonai alayich nigla Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikabela. Lo tevoshi v'lo tikami ma tishtochachi u'ma temibach yechasu ani eyami nivnata ir al tila. Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikabela v'hayulim shisa shahawasayich v'rachaku kol mivalayich yasis alayich Elohayich kimchas chatan al kala. Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikabela yamin usmoti frotzi v'yet Adonai taritzi ayadish ben barzi v'nismecha v'nagila. Lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikabela boi v'shalom ateret bala gam besimcha uvetzala tochem munei am segula boi chala lecha dodi likrat kala b'nei Shabbat nikabela. You may be seated. Page 27, Psalm 92. A psalm, the song of the day of Shabbat. It is good to thank you, Adonai, and sing to your name most high, to proclaim your love at daybreak, your faithfulness each night. Finger the lute, pluck the harp, let the sound of the lyre rise up. You gladden me with your deeds, Adonai, and I shall sing of your handiwork. How wonderful are your works, Adonai, how subtle your designs. The arrogant do not understand. The fool does not comprehend this. The wicked flourish like grass, and every evildoer blossoms only to be destroyed forever. But you, Adonai, are exalted for all time. Surely your enemies, Adonai, surely your enemies will perish. All who commit evil will be scattered. As a wild bull raises up its horn, you raised my head high, anointed it with fresh oil. As my enemies gather against me, my gaze remains steady, for my ears listen and hear. The righteous flourish like the date palm, thrive like a cedar in Lebanon, planted in the house of Adonai. They flourish in our God's courtyards. In old age they remain fruitful, still fresh and bountiful, proclaiming, Adonai is upright, my rock in whom there is no flaw. Tzadik tamar yifrach, ki erez balvanon yiske shetulim bevet Adonai bechatzrot Eloheinu yafrichu od yenuvun beseva teshenim verananim yeyu lehagid ki yashar Adonai tzuri v'lo avlatabo. Page 29, Psalm 93. Adonai is sovereign, robed in splendor, girded in strength. The earth stands firm, not to be dislodged. From earliest time you were enthroned, you are eternal. The rivers rise up, Adonai, the rivers raise up their roar. The rivers raise up their waves above the roar of the sea, of vast sea, and the majestic breakers of the ocean. Adonai stands supreme in the heavens. In your house, beautiful in its holiness, your testimonies endure, Adonai, for all time. So I wish you all a Shabbat Shalom once again. It's been a very difficult 2 or 3 weeks. Irene and I are still struggling with our health, and but I tell you what, it feels so great, and I feel so much more alive when I'm here with you at this Shabbat service. So Shabbat Shalom to you all. We're now in we started the book of Genesis. With Simchat Torah, we ended the book of Deuteronomy and began right again with Bereshit, the book of Genesis. And this is the first Shabbat of the liturgical year, the cycle of Torah readings. So we were in Bereshit, but the way the readings work is each Torah portion is split into thirds. We call this a triennial reading. The first year we read from Genesis 1:1 till a certain place. The second triennial, which we just finished this past year, we read the middle section. And so for every portion we read this year will be in the third triennial. And then, of course, next year at this time we'll be starting again with the first triennial. So, and it's interesting because of all of the things that go on at the beginning of Genesis and in the middle of this particular portion, we have the 7 days of creation, the 2 creation stories. We have we have the Cain and Abel story. We have the Tower of Babel story, and then we get to the last part of the Torah reading, and it begins the list of generations that begins with Adam and Eve and ends with the generation of Noah. And that is 10 generations. 10 is a very, very biblical number, like the number 7. It indicates completeness. So this is a complete generation from Adam through Noah. Then, of course, God desires to start over, and then we begin another march of another 10 generations from Noah to Abraham. But I found this a devar that was given by Rabbi Bradley Shavit Artson, the dean of my rabbinical school, Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies. And this really spoke to me because it really is kind of strange to think of this march of generations and try to find something relevant. But my Rav always finds something, and I wanted to share with you his words. In recording the 10 generations separating Adam to Noah, the Torah provides brief encapsulations of their lives. By far the most intriguing in the list is Hanoch. In English, he is referred to as Enoch, the 7th generation of humanity. Here is the complete record of what the Torah reveals about Hanoch. When Jared had lived 162 years, he begot Hanoch. When Hanoch had lived 65 years, he begot Methuselah, or Methuselah as we know him in English. After the birth of Methuselah, Hanoch walked with God 300 years, and he begot sons and daughters. All the days of Hanoch came to 365 years. Hanoch walked with God, and then he was no more, for God took him. There are several striking features in this tantalizing description of Hanoch's life. That the number of his years equals the days of the solar year may provide the context, the result of, or the source of post-biblical legends that attribute the invention of the solar calendar to Hanoch. Another striking note is the twofold repetition of the phrase, "and he walked with God." With the other people in the list of generations, we are simply told that they lived. Only Hanoch merits this superlative description of having walked with God during his life. On the level of Peshat, the contextual meaning, it appears that Hanoch was a righteous man who lived his life in full according to the divine will and great intimacy with God. The phrase appears only on 2 other occasions, for Noah and for the ideal priest described by the prophet Malachi. High praise indeed. The curious nature of his end also attracts our attention. The phrase, "he was no more," replaces the normal of expression, "then he died." It suggests some sudden, unexpected, and unexplained disappearance, different from the more standard deaths that the other figures experienced. This unusual end is linked to 2 other oddities. He dies very young, relatively speaking. His father lived for 800 years. His son lived 969 years. Hanoch only lived a third as long as they did. And the Torah tells us that God took him. Biblical scholar Nahum Sarna explains that this is probably a euphemism for death, and Rashi explains it as a premature death. Yet one could also read this odd passage as suggesting that Hanoch didn't die at all, that like Elijah, he was simply carried off to heaven. In fact, the abundant midrashim make that suggestion explicit. Derech Eretz Zuta observes that he was one of only 9 tzaddikim who entered paradise without having died first. Another legend says that God brought him to heaven to become the chief of the angels. God transformed him into the angel Metatron, altering his fleshy body into one of purest fire. Whether he died a natural death or was carried to heaven, the greatest curiosity linked to Hanoch is that he is described as having walked with God and as having died an early death. How is that possible? Shouldn't his righteousness have been rewarded with longevity? Isn't his premature death a scandal, an accusation against God? The rabbis of the Talmud were very aware of this problem, and they resolved it by stating that Hanoch wasn't really righteous after all. They observed that the second superfluous, he walked with God, is followed immediately by he was no more. And they connected the two. Hanoch was a hypocrite, acting sometimes as a tzaddik, as a righteous person, sometimes as a rasha, a wicked person. Therefore, the Holy Blessing One said, while he is righteous, I will remove him. His early death then is really an act of divine mercy, allowing him to die in a state of righteousness, allowing him to enjoy a greater reward in the coming world. That solution to the problem of why a good man would die an early death has clear connotations for how the rabbis see the world and God's justice in the world. However much we may admire their faith and their confidence, most moderns cannot accept the notion that what is and what ought to be are one and the same. We have a hard time regarding a message from a just and loving God in an early death. What then can this biblical paradox mean for us? What do we do with the idea that one can walk with God during his lifetime and still suffer disappointment, misfortune, illness, and death? In fact, rabbinic opinion itself suggests another way to read God's message in this story. The Bechor Shor of 12th century France suggests that the second he walked with God was repeated specifically to ensure that we not read the brevity of Hanoch's life as a punishment for sin. Whatever the reason for Hanoch's early death, it is not a moral or religious condemnation of the quality of his life. In our own day, too, we still suffer from those who would use religion as a cudgel to denigrate other human beings and castigate their opponents. How many have suggested that AIDS, for example, is the payment for sin? Some prominent ministers have suggested that one of the LA earthquakes was a punishment for Hollywood's lifestyle. The example of Hanoch repudiates such smug judgment. The righteous suffer and die just as the rest of us do. Whether one is rich or poor, whether one survives into a ripe old age or not, is not necessarily a measure of divine favor or wrath. Hanoch reminds us that one can be a tzaddik and still suffer, that bad things do happen to good people. God is to be found not in the punishment, not in the suffering, not in the self-righteous condemnation, but in the hands of those who reach out to help. In the wisdom we muster to mitigate each other's pain, to comfort each other's sorrow, and to heighten each other's joy. Walking with God is not an investment for a better tomorrow. It is the expression of a righteous today. No mere tool for amassing reward, walking with God is the way to infuse whatever time we do have with profundity and with purpose. Anyone care for a stroll? Shabbat Shalom. Rabbi Artson is a brilliant orator. And his takes on the Torah are phenomenal. And I'm glad to be able to share those words with you. We now continue with Ma'ariv. Please rise, page 39a, for the Baruch Hu, the call to worship. Baruch Hu et Adonai HaMevorach, Baruch Adonai Varach, Leolam Voed. You may be seated. Baruch et Adonai Eloheinu melech olam asher b'dvarim. Umahavi yom umevi laila umavdihu ben yom uvein laila Adonai tzavot shemo el chai v'kayim tamid yimloch oleinu lelam voed. Baruch et Adonai HaMariv Aravim, page 40. Ahavat olam beit Yisrael amchavta Torah u'mitzvot chukim u'mishpatim otanu limadeta al kein Adonai Eloheinu b'shachveinu v'kumeinu nasiach bechukecha v'nismach b'divrei Toratecha uv'mitzvotecha le'olam voed ki hem chayenu v'orech yameinu uvohem menege yomam v'layla v'yavadachatasi mimenu la'olamim. Baruch atah Adonai ohev amo Yisrael. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. V'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavecha v'chol nafshecha v'chol me'odecha v'hayu hadvarim ho'ele asher anochi mitzavecha hayom al levavecha v'shinanetam levanecha v'dibarta bam v'shivtecha b'veitecha uv'lechtecha v'derech uv'shachpecha v'kumecha v'kshartam neot al yadecha v'hayu letotafot b'ninecha uchtabtam namzuz beitecha uv'isharecha v'ya'im shamo tishmo. Vayomer Adonai Moshe lemor daber el bnei Yisrael v'yamarta lehem v'yasu lehem tzitzit al kanfei v'gnehem ledoratam v'natnu al tzitzit hakana petiol tachele v'haya lachem letzitzit oritem oto uschartem net kol mitzvot Adonai v'asitem otam V'lo tatu acharei levavachem liacharei nechem asher tem zonim achareihem leman dizgeru v'asitem net kol mitzvotai v'item kadoshim leloechem ani Adonai Eloechem asher otzeiti etachem me'eretz Mitzrayim liot lachem le'elohim ani Adonai Eloechem. Emet, page 43a. V'emunu kozof hakayam aleinu. Page 44. U'malchuto b'ratzon kibalea Moshe u'v'neschlach ha'neshira b'simcha rabba v'yamahu chulam Mi chamocha ba'elim Adonai. Mi kamocha nedor b'kodesh norati lot o seifele. Machutecha uvenecha bokiyam lifnei Moshe zeli anu v'yameru Adonai imloch le'olam voed v'nehemar ki v'ada Adonai et Yaakov u'golod mi'chazak mimenu baruch et Adonai Ka'al Yisrael. Page 45. Hashkivenu Adonai Eloheinu. Ushmotzetenu vein lachem ushlemet avi elam ufrosalin uskat shlemecha baruch et Adonai haboretz ukat shalom aleinu ve'al kol amo Yisrael ve'al Yerushalayim. We rise, page 46. V'shamro v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam barit olam. V'shamro v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam barit olam. Beini uvein b'nei Yisrael oti le'olam oti le'olam oti le'olam. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam barit olam. Ki sheshet yamim asa Adonai et ha-shamayim v'et ha'aretz. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam barit olam. Vayom shvi shavat vayinafash shavat vayinafash shavat vayinafash. V'shamru v'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat ledoratam barit olam. We rise for the silent Amidah for Friday night, pages 47 through 52. Mashiva Ruach Marid Agashem. All right, we can play a game. Fern is wondering what that image to the right of me is. that looks like a stack. She says it looks like a stack of napkins, which it's not. So, except now, we can play this game, but Chaz and Charles cannot answer because he knows what it is. What do you think? Go ahead and type in chat in Facebook what you think that thing is. that's Fern's referring to. And while you're pondering that, let us rise, page 56, as the ark is open for Elena. Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol latet kedula liutzeh bereshit shelo asanu kugoyei haratzot velo samanu kamishmachot hadama shelo sam chelkeinu kahem v'gor aleinu kechol hamonam v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Shehu Notei Shamayim V'Yosed Haaretz, Moshav Yikara B'Shamayim Imao, U'Shchinatu Zo, Begavei Meromim, Hu Eloheinu Einod, Emet Malkeinu Evazulato, Kakatu B'Torato, V'yadat Ahayem v'hashivota elavavecha ki Adonai hu Elohim b'shamayim mimal v'al haaretz mitachat einod al kenik v'l'chon li. Gagadu b'toratech Adonai imloch lilam voed v'nehemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo echad. There's an awful lot of people in and out of our community that are ill, that are struggling with life, with COVID, with a lot of things. So I usually don't do a Mishaberach for the ill until we get to the Torah service on Saturday morning. But I thought it might be appropriate to mention all of those in our community that are ill on a Friday night. I do this once in a while. So I will chant Debbie Friedman's version of Mishaberach. And in the middle, we will... I'll mention all the names and then I'll end with the end bracha. Misheberach avoteinu mikor bracha leimoteinu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. And we pray for Eugene Labato, Terry Aronoff, Helen Byrne, Rhonda Blitz, Brooke Ben Elisheva, Arnold Fast, Sheila Guidry, Chana Betzara, Linda Smith, Marjorie Allen, Charles Miller, Sherry Russ, Sharon Redding, Spiris Bat Rivka, Becca Martinez, Isaac Ben Joseph, Mike Golson, Marsha Orange, Elisheva Batsara, Harab Malki Tzedek Ben Barucham, Jerry Weisenfeld, Kay Booley, Jeannie Meiser, Miriam Badina, Tara Martinez Fernandez, Liz Wolko, Deanna Barber, Miriam Bat Rivka, Taraz Bat Ruth, Mark Platnick, Merlone Jermaine Barnes, Virginia Madden, Renee and Maddie Raminga, Raymond Labato Jr., Natalie Copeland, Christopher Hill, Todd Bapp, Michelle Zucker, Or Simcha Devor Batina, Dana Driscoll, Marcia Belcher, Ed Jackman, Colton Gower, Scott Decker, Terry Minga, Bela Basrivka, William Williams, Marilyn Fadomsky, Benjamin Ben Miriam, Wayne Knox, Jack Pollacard, Jim Mittenswy, Lucy and Tilly Colwell, Rachel Manning, Vinnie Marnstein, and Linda Simons. This week we will observe I'm sorry, I forgot to finish that. Mishe beirach imotenu mikor abracha liavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. And I wish all of those suffering a refuah shlema. I wish you a complete and quick healing. This week we will observe yahrzeits for Bertha G. Silverman, Alex Lipton, Mo Rosenberg, Jacob Koppel-Froelich, Chaya Sarah Goldberg, Joseph Piha, Koppel-Froelich, Sherwin Ginsberg, Sue Hannon, Nadine Sharker, Isaac Tepich, Jake Aronov, Isaac J. Hassan, and Jacob Schulman. Those observing yahrzeit to those who mourn, please rise, page 58, and join me for the Kaddish Tome, the Mourner's Kaddish. Yitgadal v'yitgadash shemei Rabbah, b'yoma divra chirutei v'yamlech malchutei, b'chayichon v'yamechon v'chayei dechol beit Yisrael, ba'agala v'zman kariv yimaru amen. Yehi shmei Rabbah mevarach le'lam olmei maya. Yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitchumam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal. Shmei dekudisha b'richu. Le'lam min kol birchata v'shirata. Tushbachata v'nechamata da'amiran b'yoma v'yimaru amen. Yehi shlama Rabbah min shemaya. V'chayim aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimaru amen. O say shalom b'mirmav. Uyaseh shalom aleinu v'yal kol Yisrael v'yimaru amen. You may be seated. So now I don't know what you're referring to, Fern. If it indeed, Yvette pointed to this is a yahrzeit candle, okay, on a yahrzeit stand. If you're referring to this object here, that's actually the divider, the plexiglass divider that, let me if I can show you another angle so you can see that. I don't know why I'm doing this, but there it is. This is the plexiglass. If that's what you're referring to, I don't know. Let me know if that was what you were referring to yet. The first one. Okay. Boom, boom, boom. Yvette got it right. It is, this is a yahrzeit, a Yizkor stand that actually was someone from our funeral home had in a back storage room. They didn't know what it was, so they brought it to me thinking I would know what it is. And it looks to me like it is a yahrzeit candle holder, a Yizkor candle holder, that maybe was used by a Chevra Kadisha in a previous generation. Don't know. So, yeah, the big round thing is tinfoil, actually, so the candle doesn't burn through the wood. Okay. Shabbat Shalom, welcome. Okay, that took a bit of time. Thank you all for joining me this evening. We will be back tomorrow morning at 9:30 for a continuation of Shabbat services. Tomorrow evening at 7:30, we will join for Havdalah. And if you are on our master list, you already got the link. If you did not get the link, please email me, rabbi@agudathmontgomery.com, and I'll get you that link. We begin at 7:30, sort of promptly. And nothing to report on. There's no holidays this week, so there's nothing to report on. And we will go ahead and conclude our service on page 211 with Adon Olam. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'et Nasa V'chefso Kol Hazai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam V'yacharei Kichlota Kol Levado Yimloch Nara Adon Olam V'hu haya v'hu hoveh v'hu yeh b'tifara Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'et Nasa V'chefso Kol Hazai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam V'hu echad v'yein sheni lam V'hu haya v'hu B'li reshit b'li tachlit V'lo hoz v'ha misra Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'et Nasa V'chefso Kol Hazai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam V'hu Eli V'chai Goali V'tzorchev li b'Etz Ahayem Adon Olam V'hu Nisi Umanosli Minat Kosi B'yom Mikra Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'et Nasa V'chefso Kol Hazai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam Biyado Afkid Ruchi B'yetishan V'yaira Adon Olam V'im Ruchi Geviyati Adon Eli V'lo Ira Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem Kol Yitzir Nivra Li'et Nasa V'chefso Kol Hazai Melech Shemo Nikra Adon Olam. Shabbat Shalom to everyone. Oh, there it is. There's all. Thank you, Chazan Charles, for providing entertainment for your rabbi with all of those hearts coming up. Shabbat Shalom to everyone.